Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. Today we are looking at Captain Atom issue 11. This issue is part of the Millennium storyline. Now Millennium was I believe 7-part story. It was a weekly book that came out. It was a big event crossover. This book ties into that. Honestly, it really hurts the issue. Now, Carrie Bates wrote it, co-plot by Greg Weisman, penciler was Pat Broderick, inker Bob Smith, Duncan Andrews did letters, colorist was Nancy Houlihan, and editor was Denny O'Neil. Now, we start off with Captain Atom flying into a situation where he has to get past Firestorm because in the Suicide Squad book, the Suicide Squad was planting a bomb to destroy the Manhunter base. This issue doesn't feature Suicide Squad. They're just referenced. Captain Flag and his team are just briefly referenced. Now, what's happening is Captain Atom has to distract Firestorm and get through him to make sure that the squad can get out alive. Because if he doesn't, they're not going to. So he attacks Firestorm, and Firestorm's been brainwashed by the Manhunters who claim that they're his creators. The Manhunters have infiltrated all levels of government. They are manipulating things kind of behind the scenes. It was actually a cool concept, but Millennium was, as I recall it anyway, pretty terrible. Captain Atom is caught up in a molecular storm that's basically like a globe with pink gas or something in there, and he tries to blast his way out, but it's not working, and Firestorm won't let him out. So he's got to talk Firestorm into disobeying his orders. And he can tell that Firestorm is kind of not right and that he's been brainwashed. So he's trying to talk to him like a reasonable, rational person, trying to say you have to overcome your fears and all this. And he gives the example of this little kid who was afraid of flying but loved planes. So his dad took him up in a biplane crop duster to experience the joys of flying. And at first the kid was terrified, but then he had a lot of fun. And then he became an Air Force pilot, and it was, of course, Captain Atom. That story didn't work. He tries to give another scenario where in his fake secret days before he was a public character, he came across a couple guys that had stolen a radio van, and they were told to kill these guys because they had stolen weapons technology. Well, that was a lie by Ealing, and he managed to discover the guys before the military did, and it turns out these guys were victims of a nuclear blast back in the old days in Nevada at the test sites, and they had contracted terminal cancer. And Captain Atom intercepted the missile that was meant to kill them, and it allowed these guys to broadcast the truth to the world. Well, it turns out because that was a complete lie, Firestorm knew it was a lie because the Manhunters had filled him in on his actual past. So Captain Atom is still trapped in the orb, can't blast his way out, and now the gas turns toxic. So instead of just a storm, it's now a nerve gas. Captain Atom tries to escape again, but it fails. He's supposed to be getting ready for a TV appearance, but he's obviously not going to make it. But the TV appearance is important because the fill-in is going to be G. Gordon Liddy, who was embroiled in some various scandals and things like that. He was actually a big figure in the 80s, so you might want to look him up if you're interested in politics. But one of the military guys that's with him is actually an undercover manhunter, and we had gotten hints of this guy previously when they said that Captain Atom's story in the cover with the Justice League, it was last issue, when the Justice League was sequestered in their building. This guy was very curious about that sort of thing. Well, he has to go outside to smoke because this is around the time smoking bans started coming into play. And who should approach him out there but General Ealing? And Ealing knows something's up. The guy pulls a laser gun on him, and Ealing shoots him. And he says, "My suspicions about you were correct, Hadley. You're dismissed." Bum, bum, bum. Then we go back to Captain Atom, and with Captain Atom's cover secure, thanks to Ealing's slightly murderous intentions, we go back to the Captain and Firestorm, and Captain Atom confesses the truth about it, how it's all a lie, and he was convicted of treason. And he talks about wanting to reunite with his kids and clear his name. And then Firestorm frees him. And he says, "Look, we've only got a minute. I need your help if we're going to save these guys. Rick Flag and his team are planning an explosive. They're not going to get out unless we save them." So they fly out there. Captain Atom absorbs as much of the blast as he can. Firestorm turns the remaining energy into snow. And then when asked why he did it, Firestorm says, "Well, it's when you were talking about your kids. I believed you, and I was prepared to accept the responsibility for my actions." And then he says, "Every fiber of my being tells me I made the right choice. And don't worry about the lie, Captain. Friends don't betray each other's secrets." It was a pretty interesting issue. It was just If you don't know the history of the Millennium storyline, at least in passing, this issue won't make a lot of sense because it's not part of the greater story arc that's been going on, and it's really not part of anything that's coming up. Millennium was a pretty big failure overall. It was a big deal at the time, and people really lost interest in it pretty quickly. And I think that this issue kind of ties into it too much. There are a few interesting aspects, like the Manhunter guy Hadley being exposed and being killed, but overall it's definitely the weakest issue so far. So unfortunately, this suffered from a lot of problems that tie-ins have, in that over time, if you haven't read that story, the individual issue makes no sense whatsoever. You would have to track down the entire Millennium run for this to make any sense, and probably 3 or 4 peripheral books, because you'd want to read the Firestorm manual, where Firestorm was brainwashed and had to be bombed. They literally had to nuke him. And you would have to read the Suicide Squad issue with Rick Flag leading his team in there. You'd have to read this one, and this is part of Millennium Week 4, so you'd have to read all 4 the first issues of Millennium, find out what's going on, and probably like Swamp Thing and a few others. So yeah, I would definitely say this is the weakest issue of the series so far. It's still pretty well written, it's just disjointed and out of place. So yeah, I would recommend reading it just for the historical aspect of what's going on and the completionist factor. But if you just want to read a Captain Atom story, this is really not the issue for that. I guess that's all I got to say on this one. Thank you as always for listening and supporting the channel, and we hope to see you in the next episode.